Now maturation phase. After multiplication phase, growth phase. Growth phase is followed by maturation phase. Remember, maturation phase involves reduction division. First meiosis and second meiosis. Start from primary oocyte. Primary oocyte is already formed, which is a diploid cell having 46 chromosomes. Primary oocyte. It is formed in the multiplicative phase. Now each primary oocyte begins first meiosis. Meiosis 1 before the onset of puberty. Meiosis 1 begins before the onset of puberty. Now first meiosis consists of prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1. First meiosis begins before the onset of puberty, but it is temporarily arrested after prophase 1. It does not occur till the onset of puberty. Meiosis 1 is temporarily stopped. It is temporarily arrested after prophase 1. So prophase 1 is only complete before the onset of puberty. Meiosis 1 does not start till the female attains puberty. It is arrested. By the time the primary oocyte transforms into primary follicles. These are the primary follicles. The primary oocyte becomes surrounded by a single layer of follicular cells. I have drawn only one primary oocyte. There are a large number of primary oocytes. All of them transform into primary follicles. Each primary oocyte is surrounded by a single layer of follicular cells, and the primary follicles develop. Primary follicles are formed in the ovary. Now, the primary oocyte. Consider the primary oocyte. The oocyte means the cell inside the follicle. Do not consider the follicular cells now. Consider the primary oocyte, which is enclosed by the follicular cells. The primary oocyte now begins meiosis 1 once again after the onset of puberty. Meiosis 1 is restarted after the female attains puberty. So after the onset of puberty, the first meiosis is complete. First meiosis is complete. As a result of first meiosis, each primary oocyte is divided into two haploid daughter cells. The division is unequal. One is very large, the other is very small. The larger haploid daughter cell is called secondary oocyte, and the smaller daughter cell is called first polar body. Meiosis 1 is unequal division. The primary oocyte is divided unequally into a larger haploid secondary oocyte and a smaller haploid first polar body. The secondary oocyte is larger because it obtains most of the nutrients of the primary oocyte. The secondary oocyte receives the bulk of the nutrient-rich cytoplasm of the primary oocyte, so it is larger in size. First polar body is very small. Both are haploid. These are the products which are formed after the onset of puberty in the ovaries because of first meiosis. By the time meiosis 1 is complete, the primary follicles transform into tertiary follicles. Meiosis 1 is complete. At the same time, tertiary follicles appear in the ovaries. There is a large difference between primary follicles and tertiary follicles. Please remember, the oocyte inside the primary follicle is primary oocyte. It is undergoing first meiosis, and it is divided into secondary oocyte and first polar body. Tertiary follicle, it is the follicle inside the tertiary follicle. The oocyte is secondary oocyte. It is larger in size and it has many structural differences also. Please remember, primary follicle means primary oocyte surrounded by a single layer of follicular cells, a single layer, and the oocyte is primary oocyte. This is secondary oocyte, and the secondary oocyte is surrounded by multiple layers of follicular cells. So in the tertiary follicle, the oocyte is secondary oocyte and follicular cells are in multiple layers. So meiosis 1 is complete at the stage of tertiary follicles. The primary follicles gradually transform into secondary follicle. Secondary follicles transform into tertiary follicles. So this is the follicular development which goes on hand in hand. Meiosis 1 is occurring at the same time follicular development is also occurring. So this is primary oocyte. It is divided into secondary oocyte and first polar body because of meiosis 1. First meiosis after the onset of puberty. And when meiosis 1 is complete, the ovary contains only secondary oocyte. That means tertiary follicles. When secondary oocyte is surrounded by multiple layers of follicular cells, it is called tertiary follicles. So after meiosis 1, the two ovaries contain tertiary follicles. Now, tertiary follicles transform into Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle is also different from tertiary follicle in the structural features. But the similarity is the tertiary follicle contains secondary oocyte inside it. Graafian follicle also contains secondary oocyte inside it. And the first polar body, this is the first polar body, it remains along with the secondary oocyte. This black colored body is the first polar body which is attached to the secondary oocyte inside the Graafian follicle. So Graafian follicle is the final stage of follicle. It is the mature follicle. After that, follicular development will not occur any further. The final stage of follicular growth is Graafian follicle or mature follicle. In each ovary, only one Graafian follicle develops. All the tertiary follicles do not transform. Only one Graafian follicle is visible inside each ovary. Only one mature follicle is seen inside each ovary, right ovary as well as left ovary. Now, at the stage of Graafian follicle, ovulation occurs. Ovulation means what? Release of secondary oocyte from the ovary into the oviduct. Please remember, only the secondary oocyte is released from the ovary into the oviduct. The rest of the Graafian follicle remains inside the ovary. The rest of the empty follicle after the secondary oocyte is released, the Graafian follicle becomes empty. It is left in the ovary. Only the secondary oocyte is released into the oviduct. So ovulation is complete. Now secondary oocyte is in the oviduct. The secondary oocyte has reached the oviduct. Now in the oviduct, what happens? In the oviduct, the secondary oocyte begins second meiosis, meiosis 2. Meiosis 2 again consists of the following substages: prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2. Please remember, meiosis 2 begins, but it is temporarily arrested after metaphase 2. Meiosis 2 is partially complete after metaphase 2 in the oviduct. The secondary oocyte will again start meiosis 2 only after the sperm enters. When the sperm penetrates the secondary oocyte in the oviduct, then meiosis 2 will be complete. So sperm entry or penetration of sperm triggers completion of second meiosis. So secondary oocyte completes meiosis 2 only after the sperm enters the secondary oocyte. Because of second meiosis, now the secondary oocyte inside the oviduct is divided into two unequal haploid cells. One is very large called ovum, egg or oocyte, 23 chromosomes. The other is very small, that is called second polar body. So meiosis 2 occurs in the oviduct. Meiosis 1 occurs in the ovary. The secondary oocyte is divided into two unequal daughter cells. The division is again unequal. One large nutrient filled ovum and the smaller second polar body. In this way, ovum or egg is formed in the oviduct, which is now ready for fertilization. The sperm has already entered the secondary oocyte. Only when the sperm penetrates the secondary oocyte, it completes second meiosis and forms the ovum and the second polar body. And the fertilization process will be complete. The zygote will be completely formed when the nucleus of the ovum and nucleus of the sperm fuse to form a diploid nucleus. So this part, second meiosis, occurs in the oviduct and first meiosis occurs in the ovary. So this is the maturation phase, which consists of meiosis 1 and meiosis 2.